This video is brought to you by ELAC, makers of the Altair G1 digital streaming deck. Click to auralic.com for more information.
So yeah, this is what lockdown can do to one's hair. I look like a bit of a pencil really, don't I? Q Acoustics, we've seen two of their pairs of speakers before. I made a video about the Concept 300 passive stand mount, high gloss white with the very, very nice tripod 10 Segwity stand. But that was a high-end stand mount loudspeaker, like several $1,000s. Last year, we made a video about the 3030i entry-level stand mount. That's a few $100. I think it's a great speaker. Not as impressive necessarily as the Concept 300 obviously in sound, but also in terms of looks. So when Q Acoustics last year announced their first active range of streaming loudspeakers, the stand mount that you see behind me, it's called the Active 200. When that was announced, I was very keen to get a pair. So yeah, as you can see, Q Acoustics kindly obliged, because I love the way that Q Acoustics gear looks, I love the way it sounds, and I like streaming active loudspeakers. Now, as you can see, they've inherited that sort of 10 Segwity style, but not exactly the same stand, and they have quite an unusual look, which we'll come to in a moment, but I think they're a little bit like the Devialet Phantom and Phantom Reactor in that they'll divide opinion. Because I think you'll either like the look of these or you'll just hate them. I think they look fantastic. Before we started filming, Olaf said they look a bit like a Star Wars speaker. And I see that as a terrific compliment. €2,000 is what these will cost you per pair. You can get them in black or white, just like the Phantom Reactor. No, I don't have a pair of Phantom Reactor here anymore, so you're going to get no comparisons to that, because if I were to make any kind of comparison to the Devialet Phantom Reactor and these speakers, that would just be absolute nonsense. Anyway, these have a very solid cabinet. It feels very robust. They're not light. They feel pretty heavy. There's a lot inside. The matte white finish is very nice. I definitely prefer that to a gloss white, but that's a personal thing. I love the look of the stand, and I like the idea that the wire maintains the tension inside the stand. And those stands are an extra $500 US. So really the complete package is $2,500 US. And if you heard that sound just now, that bleep and that sound, that's the speakers powering down. Now, if you look at the front of the speaker, you can tell that it's not your average kind of loudspeaker. There's no obvious sort of mid-bass driver on the front. There's no obvious sort of tweeter, even coaxially aligned. What we do see is a small grille, and behind that are two almost 6 centimeter BMR drivers. It's a different kind of driver, and it's implemented, I believe, so Q Acoustics say, for super wide dispersion. So, spraying the sound all over the room. And the other reason I think Q Acoustics have gone for this, in fact, they have a white paper about this. If you want to read it, I'll put the link below, is that a BMR driver can do a very wide frequency range. So one of the BMR drivers in this speaker will go all the way up to 20 kilohertz, and the other one will go up to 5 kilohertz. But they're both designed to cross over to the bass driver on the back, I'll come to that in a moment, at 150 hertz. So you can tell that these BMR drivers are designed to do some treble, some mid-range and some upper bass. Now the bass driver on the back of the speaker, it's almost like a subwoofer, almost. It's 11.4 centimeters in diameter. It doesn't fire straight off the back of the speaker. There is a baffle that it fires into, so the dispersion is redirected sideways. And that's done, for acoustic reasons, obviously. And I guess that will play somewhat into the time alignment of all of the drivers. And then everything else is stitched together with digital signal processing, DSP, which we spoke about last week. So all of the crossover, so how the drivers are implemented within the cabinet, all the crossover is done in DSP. So that means each driver has its own DAC, each driver has its own amplifier. And DSP also handles the boundary compensation settings that can be activated on the rear of the speaker with a very nice toggle switch. So there's a setting for close to the front wall, and then a setting for close to the front wall and in a corner. Now you can see that I don't have either of those situations going on here. I've got the speakers at least a meter from my front wall and they're not in corners. So I didn't engage those settings. I will say right out of the gate, this is not a bass heavy speaker. So I think you'd have to have a pretty extreme situation to need to engage that toggle switch. So for the purposes of this review, I listen to these speakers where you see them now. My listening position is here. My room is 6 meters by 5 meters. And I actually thought they were a very, very good fit for the room. The amount of music that came out, the way they pressurized the room was just very nice. So these are streaming loudspeakers, but they're more like the Buchardt in their configuration than the KEF LS50 Wireless. In that there is a hub into which we feed all of our sources, and then that hub uses a proprietary wireless transmission protocol to send left and right channels independently to each speaker. So it's not WISA or WISA like the Buchardt A500, but there is a hub. On the back of the hub, very, very surprisingly for me anyway, there is an analog input which you can toggle switch between line level, so like CD players, DACs, that kind of thing, and also phono. So I've got my Technics turntable connected directly to that hub. I'm using an cartridge from ORTOFON, so obviously if I had an MC cartridge, I'd either need a step-up transformer or I'd need to use an external phono stage and then go into the analog input at line level. Then there are digital inputs on the hub. There's a Toslink input. Now I would have liked 2 of those because I connect my Xiaomi Android TV box Toslink into it, and I also use a Primare NP5 streamer at the moment, and that wants to go Toslink into it, so I have to choose and swap them around when I need them. Now I go with the Primare just for the sake of this video. Don't think I'm just investing in the Primare forever. People often think, oh, John's using the Bluesound in that situation now. Why? Well, it's just for this situation of this video. So the Primare I'm using because it is room ready. And the streaming hub that comes with the Q Acoustics loudspeakers is not room ready yet. So that's how I get room readiness into this particular system. Otherwise, I could use the Q Acoustics streaming hub's Chromecast input, or I could use the Apple AirPlay input. I could use those normally for normal Chromecast, normal AirPlay, but I could also use them for Roon. Also inside the Q Acoustics streaming hub is UPnP support, but it's not gapless. It doesn't give us gapless playback. So if I'm playing Nina Kravitz's Fabric Mix, which I often use to test for gapless playback, It inserts like these tiny gaps during the track transitions where it should be completely seamless. And it is seamless on the Primare NP5 Prisma. So not only do I use that Primare streamer TOS link into the Q Acoustics hub for room readiness, but I also use it for gapless UPnP. So I'd love to see a firmware update down the line from Q Acoustics that makes UPnP gapless. In the wake of my Buchardt and KEF videos, many people have emailed me asking, are there any sort of stability issues in streaming wirelessly, over the air into a streaming hub and then to speakers, or just direct to speakers? No, there aren't. So there are no stability issues with these loudspeakers talking to their streaming hub, none whatsoever. And I will add that these Active 200 are the fastest to wake up when they see a streaming input than any of the other speakers I've used recently. So they're faster than the Buchardt to come alive, they're faster than the KEF to come alive. So that's a good thing. You push play and literally within a second I've got music. Great. So not only do we have streaming control of these loudspeakers, we also have a remote control like this. This is an RF remote, it's not infrared. And yes, there is a Red Hot Chili Peppers button. Very useful. Also on the speakers, there are basic buttons for volume up and volume down and source selection. But with those, sometimes they just feel a little bit slow to respond. So I'll click, change source input, and it can take like half a second to cut over to the next source. So that's not quite as slick as I would like. And then sometimes when I'm adjusting volume with this remote, sometimes, I don't know why, the speaker system is a little bit slow to respond. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, and I won't hear 1, 2, 3 change in volume. There'll be like a second delay and then I'll hear it. So something's going on there, but I'm sure that Q Acoustics will sort that with a future firmware update. I mean, these speakers are brand new and it's their first active loudspeaker model. Oh, rounding out the feature set on the streaming hub here are HDMI ARC, Spotify Connect, and Bluetooth. For the last few weeks, I've been listening to the new Neil Young Archives 2 box set, which is just fantastic because it covers a whole bunch of Harvest and On the Beach, which is my favorite, through Zuma, I think through Tonight's the Night. I don't love that album actually. I know, heresy, right? And then all the way up to just before Live Rust. So it's just like one of the sort of golden eras of Neil Young. And listening through these loudspeakers, I just love how they're very clean and transparent and give us plenty of inner detail. They are somewhat mid-range focused, so there is a mid-range that sort of pushes forward a little bit, especially the upper mid-range, which tends to give Neil Young's vocal that sort of very clean and crisp feel, which I think many people will enjoy. And this sort of crisp clarity makes the Active 200 a very, very good TV speaker, very good for dialogue. So after my sort of winter electronica for audiophiles ice music video, I bought a vinyl copy of Biosphere's Substrata because I love this album so much and I just want another vinyl copy. It's a bit extravagant because I've got a copy in Australia, but that's a different story. Anyway, I was playing this and I really like how these Q Acoustics draw a soundstage. They're very good with sort of sonic placement. They're also very good in exposing the different instrumental feel that really permeates side C here, because side C starts with this very kind of sinister vibe and then there's a release into some more sort of melodic, I won't say music, it's not necessarily music, but sounds. And so that really comes through very cleanly with these Q Acoustics loudspeakers. And on bass reach, they're probably in the same ballpark as the KEF LS50 Wireless II, maybe. But then they don't go as low as the Buchardt A500, neither are they as expensive as the Buchardt A500. We must keep that in mind. So really the KEF LS50 Wireless II is a much, much closer rival to these than the Buchardts. And so is the ELAC Navis ARB51, also another white loudspeaker. I've also been playing this album a lot recently. This is Old Codes, New Chaos from Fila Brasilia. This is their debut album. And this has some very nice bass on it. And I don't just mean bass kick drum, I mean, you know, real proper bass. And it was very nicely articulated, and it wasn't too overbearing, and it was presented just so. And I thought, yeah, this is great. And the low end on this album is quite tightly drawn. It's quite firm. It's not flabby at all. It's, you know, it's really kind of, I'm trying to avoid saying the word pert, which I don't want to say in a video like this. As this album progresses, as we get further on, it moves into sort of house territory, house music territory, and it really should swing. It has this kind of like sort of head nod vibe, and it really should swing nicely. And with these Active 200s, it kind of didn't. It sounded a bit restrained, a bit shackled. Now, Steve Guttenberg once said a very cool thing. Well, actually, he said many cool things, but this one really stuck with me, is that the best hi-fi system is the one that makes you want to play more music. Living with these for a couple of weeks, I started to kind of not want to play music. Not really, and it was bugging me. And I thought, why don't I want to play music right now? Why do I want to go and listen to headphones or just have complete silence? So in trying to sort of break this deadlock, what I did is I went back to the Q Acoustics 3030i. I hooked in the Bluesound Powernode 2i, eyes everywhere, because that was a system that I'd reviewed last year and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, maybe this will refresh my memory and maybe allow me to kind of consider whether Q Acoustics have a house sound, which I tend to think is a bit bullshit, the idea of a house sound, but whatever. I just wanted to sort of break this not wanting to listen to music deadlock, but with another pair of Q Acoustics speakers, which I knew I liked. So I did that. Now this may seem like a bit of an odd comparison, because the Q Acoustics 3030i passive loudspeaker sells for a few $100, but then once we add the Powernode, we're sort of getting into $1,500, thereabouts. So it's edging closer to the price of these Actives. But the thing is the Active were more transparent, gave us more detail, but they could not match the 3030i and the Bluesound Powernode 2i on dynamics. And dynamics, if you don't know what that is the difference between how loud sounds are presented and quiet sounds. We should hear these contrasts. And I heard those contrasts more with the 3030i than I did with the Active 200. And I'll give you an example of this. David Byrne made an album called The Catherine Wheel in '81, and the first track, His Wife Refused, starts with this excellent drum pattern from Yogi Horton. And it should have very strong dynamic contrast, so there'll be a soft here, and then a louder here, and then a medium, and then a loud, and you can tell I'm not a drummer, right? Just making those sounds makes me cringe. But to me, it sounded more convincing with the 3030i than with the Active 200. Yeah, and that's not a good thing. And to that end, dynamic contrasts is where the KEF LS50 Wireless II, and to a lesser extent the ELAC Navis, really pull ahead of the Active 200. They give us more dynamics, And that means that music comes on with a greater sense of excitement, and it holds our attention for longer, and it makes us want to play more music. And the Active 200 seemed to operate more on a singular dynamic plane. So maybe with, say, the ELAC Navis, you'll get like a louder sound here and a quiet sound here. With the Active 200 from Q Acoustics, the louder sound might sit here, and then the quiet sound might sit here. So they're just more even on this plane here, rather than being sort of more variable here, if that makes sense. It's quite hard to explain dynamics, but I'm doing my best. And what that means is that the Q Acoustics don't really shift gear in the way that I would like when the music calls for it. I think it's just a bit of a bummer, really, that these are like that. So on sound quality, the Active 200 are contrasted by the competition, so the ELAC, the Bucharts and the KEF, as being dynamically constrained. And that's disappointing, I think. Well, maybe disappointing is too strong. Because when these speakers were announced, I was very, very excited to get a pair. I was very keen to get a pair. And I'm coming away from these at the end of this sort of review period, not necessarily disappointed, just a bit indifferent. Like, I like listening to them, but yeah, they really don't make me want to play this album and that album. I'm looking at my wall of CDs here. I'm looking at Green by REM, or Lowe's The Great Destroyer, or Momus's Ping Pong. I love these records, but these speakers don't really make me want to reach for those CDs, or those CDs that I've got ripped to my room nucleus here and punch them in from there, or from Audiovana. I'm just not excited to use them as much as I thought I might be. So if all of this sounds a little bit overly negative, it's really not intended that way. It's not that these loudspeakers are bad. They're really not. They're good. But the thing is, they're not great. And great is where the ELAC Navis live and the KEF LS50 Wireless II live. Of course, if dynamics are not important to you, or that kind of visceral music excitement is not important to you, and you just like the detail and the clarity, then you might find a lot to like in these Active 200 from Q Acoustics. It's just that I tend to prioritize dynamics as an important factor for my listening enjoyment. You must remember that. It's really important. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up down below. If you like my attitude towards streaming speakers, in that I guess not everyone can be a winner, then please subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.